When Eric chased after his first love overseas, I begged him not to leave. He didn't even look back. A year later, I got married, and Eric flew back. Seeing my wedding ring, Eric, usually so cocky, broke down. He forced a smile. "Laura, do you want to take it off, or should I?" His voice trembled. "I'll buy you whatever ring you want, just toss that one. Please." I didn't have a big wedding. It was just a small gathering with about a dozen close friends and family. My husband was so sweet, made sure I didn't get tired, entertaining guests while letting me chat with my friend. My friend Nancy, watching me get married, was pretty emotional. "I thought you'd wait for Eric forever." I lowered my head and smiled a little. "I thought so too." She asked, "Does Eric know you got married?" I shook my head. "He doesn't know. He doesn't need to." She paused. "I heard Eric went crazy last night, booked a flight that very night from the US to come back." I didn't say anything. He must have been in a rush because his first love left again, just like before. Back then, when she got mad at Eric and went to America, Eric booked a ticket right in front of me, ready to chase after her. I was on my period then, wrapped in blankets but still feeling cold. Shivering, I sat in front of him, watching his slender fingers tap on the phone without hesitation, booking a flight for that night. I bit my lip, still wanting to hold him back. "Eric, can you not go?" Those bright eyes looked at me, and he smiled casually. "Stay home, be good. I'll bring you back a gift." He lifted my chin, gave me a light kiss, tucked me into the blanket. "Do you want a necklace or a bracelet?" I said nothing. Eric loved giving jewelry. He had given me lots, but never a ring. But every gift to Lisa was a ring. Taking a deep breath, I looked at his lean, handsome face and pale skin, still trying to plead, "Really can't stay?" The smile on his lips faded a little as he patted my head. "You know our arrangement." I stopped, speechless. I was the one who chased after Eric. He had one condition: the relationship had to be secret, especially from Lisa. Frankly, I was a backup. I had no grounds to stop him. Even though we lived together, and he'd even brought me to family gatherings. Seeing me quiet, he smiled, kissing my forehead. "I'll bring you a gift when I come back." I lowered my head. "When will you come back?" He calmly buttoned his shirt. "In a few days, I think." He probably didn't expect that this time her trip wasn't just a getaway. She stayed a year for school, and he stayed with her. Watching Eric's tall figure leave, I sighed. Sensing my unease, he turned back. "Think if there's anything I can do before I leave, I'll do my best." I looked at his face. "Could you help find someone?" "Evan. He's a war correspondent." Eric's face darkened. "What's he to you?" "If you can't explain, I won't help." I pressed my lips together. "My brother. From my aunt's family." His expression relaxed a little, nodding. "I'll let you know." He turned and left. I watched until he disappeared, then I took out a picture from my wallet. The photo showed a lean, handsome man, looking a lot like Eric. I traced the photo with my fingers. Eric sure was forgetful. I'd told him I grew up in an orphanage, so I had no aunt. And that there was a brother in the orphanage who took care of me as we grew up together. But he listened and forgot. Never even questioned why I loved looking at his face. Only his face. Eric truly loved Lisa. Even if Lisa's been distant for years, never settling down, he loved her willingly. And I really loved Eric. His face, similar to Evan's. I always felt grateful to Eric. He saved me. I was lost, missing Evan for 3 years. Many people said Evan was gone. I was barely living, until I saw Eric, a year younger than me. Seeing his face, so much like Evan's, I cried. I tried a million ways to get close to Eric, treating him well without question. Everyone knew I was Eric's shadow, carrying his stuff, passing messages during fights with Lisa, supporting him when drunk. Maybe I was just too good to ignore. So, one night, after a fight with Lisa and a few drinks, he pulled me into his arms. "Do you like me?" Looking at his lean, handsome face, I nodded. From that day, I was Eric's secret girlfriend. If a backup could be called a girlfriend. I did that for years. Eric and Lisa didn't work out, but we ended up living together. Sometimes he'd hold me and say, "Laura, you're the best woman to me, you don't even care about my money." I'd smile, "If you want to give, I wouldn't refuse." "But you never spent." Eric's bright eyes looked at me. "You don't spend my money. You don't wear my jewelry, and you don't push for public acknowledgement." He'd say, "Sometimes it's like you're keeping me as a backup, too." I'd tease him, poking his nose, burying into his arms. We weren't heartless, we'd been through 6 years. Those 6 years meant a lot to me. But Eric didn't feel the same. He still loved Lisa. If she called drunk at night, he'd rush over. Before, he'd leave without a word. But later, he started explaining, though he seemed guilty. I thought that meant I was becoming more important to him. But I misunderstood. He still chased Lisa overseas, without sparing a moment for me to try stopping him. He stayed a year. Although Eric came back once during that year. He was drunk and called me to pick him up. When I got there, he was in a club, video calling Lisa. Seeing me, he waved me over. "Laura, come here." He showed me to Lisa. "Let me introduce you, my girlfriend for 6 years, Laura." Lisa kept her cool, but her eyes lingered on me for a few seconds. Then she laughed. "Eric, have you fallen for someone else?" Eric laughed too. "Yeah, right. Why would I ignore my sweet, good-natured wife just to keep chasing after you?" Lisa saw Eric holding me and asked how long we'd been together. I answered honestly, 6 years. Lisa ended the video chat without even saying goodbye. She always had that air of superiority, but even she lost her cool. Eric's arm around me suddenly tensed up. That night, Eric was holding me as we slept. He got a phone call in the middle of the night. When he came back, he wouldn't stop kissing me, and neither of us got any sleep. By morning, his voice was hoarse when he said, "Laura, this is the end for us." I hadn't slept either. I guessed what was coming. I'd overheard Eric's call. Lisa casually told him to break up with me. She'd be with him the moment he did. I knew I wasn't as important as Lisa. I nodded, not wanting to make a scene. I turned away to wipe the tears from my eyes. Eric was holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. He whispered in my ear, "Your cousin's son, they found him. He didn't die. He's overseas and just lost his memory." I froze. I turned to him, "Can you help me bring him back?" Eric kissed me one last time. "I can. I owe you this." And just like that, he flew off to be with Lisa that very day. A few days later, I saw Evan. At the best hospital in the country, the top specialists were helping him. His memory came back quickly, and he remembered me. Evan had gotten injured and lost his memory while rescuing a child in a war zone. As soon as he regained consciousness, he hugged me. His gentle voice echoed in my ear, "I wasn't there for a decade, and you suffered for it." Tears streamed down my face. The empty space in my heart silently filled up. We had missed a decade together, and neither of us wanted to waste another. We got engaged soon after. Evan asked if I'd fallen for anyone else in those 10 years, telling me not to make any rash decisions I'd regret later. Eric's face blurred through my mind but faded quickly. I shook my head and smiled, "No." I traced the scars Evan had from rescuing the child and repeated, "No." Before Evan asked me, I'd dreamed about Eric a few times. In those dreams, Eric mocked me, saying not to kid myself. My heart still stung, but as time went on, I stopped dreaming about him. Those 6 years seemed to drift away, like they never happened. My best friend Nancy sometimes asked if I ever thought about Eric. I'd pause for a few seconds and shake my head. I told her I hoped he and Lisa were doing well. It was best for all of us to forget. At least for me, I'd sincerely put him behind me. A few days later, Evan and I were having dinner when we ran into one of Eric's classmates. He approached us. "Hey, you came back and didn't call?" He stopped a few steps away, face full of shock. Evan looked a lot like Eric, but he had a scar on his forehead from the war. His vibe was totally different, more cool-headed and poised, unlike Eric's carefree, playboy attitude. The classmates stared at Evan, then at me, confused. "Laura, what's this?" He thought for a moment. "Did you cheat on Eric?" I shook my head. "We broke up." The classmate looked even more stunned. "Eric said you were still waiting for him." I cut him off. "This is my fiancé. We're getting married soon." He was shocked. He looked at me and Evan holding hands tightly, then turned and walked away quickly, making a phone call as he went. I looked up to explain to Evan, but he just smiled. "It's all in the past. Why dwell on it?" He adjusted my hair. "I can't expect you to wait 10 years just because I vanished." My eyes welled up with tears, feeling a wave of unjustified pain. During those 3 years when I couldn't find Evan, I clung to my phone each day, waiting for it to ring. I never turned it off, jumping at every call from an unknown number. In the first year, I hoped for a call saying Evan was injured but coming home soon. In the second year, I hoped someone would tell me he was alive. By the third year, I dreaded the phone's ring but couldn't ignore it. When Eric came along, I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and panic disorder. His face was the last lifeline keeping me afloat. Being Eric's second choice wasn't without its challenges, but I needed that face to keep going. So did I love Eric? I wasn't sure. But I was grateful to him, even though everyone mocked me for waiting. I was happy to bear it. For those 6 years, Eric was a good person to me, someone who saved me from my despair. I thought I left a good impression on him, at least as someone understanding. But I never expected him to call me a liar with such anger. Eric called me late at night. I got up quietly, not wanting to wake Evan. I thought Eric wanted things he'd left at my place, but as soon as I answered, he was fierce, like he wanted to tear me apart. "Liar." His voice was rough. "Laura, you're a liar. You said he was your cousin's kid, but you lied to me." All his usual nonchalant swagger was gone. He was trying to hide his anger, and there was even a hint of childish hurt in his voice. I bowed my head, sighed, and said, "I'm sorry." I was used to saying sorry. For 6 years, I'd been apologizing to him for all kinds of things. Like don't stare at him when Lisa's around, she would get upset. Or don't try to hold his hand in front of Lisa's friends. Or don't call when he and Lisa were out. Every time, I'd apologize, look at him, and say, "I'm sorry." At first, Eric would hesitate and touch my head like a child. "Just don't do it again next time." Later, he'd just prop his chin on his hand and smile. "You're so good when you apologize." Later on, he stopped giving me a ton of rules. But I still had the instinct to apologize and blurted out, "Sorry." Eric paused, then gritted his teeth. This time, sorry isn't gonna cut it. "Laura, I'm really mad. I always knew I should have left your fling out on the front lines for life instead of giving myself a reason to be jealous." I went cold-faced. He didn't notice, kept asking, "Has he ever touched you?" "Laura, answer me. Did he touch you or not?" I interrupted his anxious voice. "Eric, stop talking about him like that. He's really important to me." There was sudden silence from his side. After a while, I heard something break. Eric bit the back of his teeth, laughing word by word. "Laura, you never said I was important to you." He said, "Remember, I haven't told you to leave, so you're still mine." "I'm not yours." I corrected him, frowning. "Since the day you flew to America for Lisa, we were done." Eric was quiet for a moment, then softly asked, "So, you're just getting back at me, right? You're with him just to spite me, huh? What if I give you a chance to reconsider?" My frown deepened. "Eric, stop it. You and Lisa have worked hard to be together. Just be happy." Eric didn't say anything. His breathing was deep and rapid. After a bit, he hung up without saying another word. I listened to the dial tone and let out a sigh. Eric still hadn't changed. As soon as Lisa was mentioned, his common sense would kick back in. Back then, when he'd get drunk, he'd call me in the middle of the night to pick him up. I'd rush out in pajamas with just a coat, meeting his intoxicated self at the bar door. In the freezing cold, my hands became numb, but he'd refuse to go back. His friend, helpless, apologized to me and then video called Lisa. "I'll let Lisa see what a mess you're in." Eric stood straight suddenly, sober as ever, got in the car and sat down. I stood outside with his friend, both wide-eyed. His friend looked at me with embarrassment and sympathy. "Sorry, I couldn't do anything. Only Lisa can make him listen." I shook my head. "It's fine. I don't mind." That night, I made him sober up soup, staying up all night to care for him. Yet he clung to me, calling out for Lisa, all night long. A voice in my head kept asking, "Laura, do you really not care? Then why were you so cold?" I sighed, forcing myself out of those memories, not wanting to dwell. I glanced at the bedroom. That's where the man I love most is. What happened in the past doesn't matter. What's important is now, and I don't care anymore. I started planning the wedding with Evan. I was trying on wedding dresses, ignoring several calls from Eric. But my phone kept buzzing, full of messages from Eric. He never sent this many messages in a month before. "Laura, I haven't told you to leave yet. Laura, you'll regret it. What are you doing? Answer me. You never took this long to reply before." The buzzing drove me crazy, so I grabbed my phone in the dressing room and quickly texted him back. "I'm trying on wedding dresses, stop texting me." The phone went silent for a moment. Then it vibrated relentlessly, like he'd gone nuts on the other end. Having no choice, I picked up. "Eric, if you keep going like this, we can't even be friends." He ignored that, repeatedly asking, "What's so good about him?" "Laura, marriage is not the same as dating." He took a deep breath. "Laura, listen to me. Do your parents even approve of you getting married? How about you wait until I get back and talk to them?" I cut him off calmly. "Eric, stop." It went quiet on his side. I quietly said, "Eric, I'm really getting married. He and I grew up together, know each other well, and love each other." Eric was about to say something, but I interrupted again. "Lisa won't be happy with you for doing this." He didn't say anything, just breathing became uneven. I sighed. "I've told you before, I grew up in an orphanage, I don't have parents. Why do you keep forgetting that?" And then I hung up. Eric didn't call again. Meanwhile, Evan patiently waited outside the dressing room, never asking why I took so long. When I came out, he hugged me tightly, refusing to let go. "Laura, thank you for loving me." I hugged him back. "Thank you too." We both grew up in an orphanage, remembering every little kindness, grateful beyond words. Unlike Eric, who had everything handed to him, and now can't handle his former obedient girlfriend seamlessly getting ready to marry, his freaking out is understandable. But I believe time heals everything. Eventually, he will let go of his resentment and move forward. But I overestimated Eric's ability to cope. A few days later, when my wedding was close and I needed beauty sleep, Eric called again late at night. He seemed drunk. "Laura, you're something else." I was growing tired of his drama, considering blocking him. His voice was hoarse and low. Back then, I didn't even think to look at the pictures. If I had looked once, I'd have known something was wrong. He was annoyed and upset, but I never looked, even brought him back from the battlefield, healed him, and dropped him right at your feet. And now I realize it, I've put the crown of jealousy on my own head. Eric's voice shook, so angry. He lowered his voice, clearly trying to control his emotions, but couldn't stop it from trembling. "Laura, are you just using me as a stand-in?" I stayed quiet. He was silent too. After a while, he strained through gritted teeth. "Say something. Why aren't you talking?" But it suddenly made me think of the past. When Lisa had another suitor, Eric posted my silhouette on Twitter. wearing that season's latest luxury brand dress Lisa had wanted. It was the only time I wore something Eric bought for me. I usually kept them with tags on in my closet, but Eric insisted that day. He snapped a photo of me in it. It was his first time posting me on Twitter, lots of likes, many comments asking who I was. Eric showed me those comments lazily, they're all asking about you. He twirled my hair around his fingers, I said you're my wife, my buddies are all jealous. I gave a small smile, but my eyes caught a fresh comment from Lisa, wanna go to a music festival? After a while, Eric glanced at his phone, paused, then turned it face down and casually pulled out his credit card. Time to buy a few bags, he said. He stood up, put on his jacket, ready to leave. I watched him heading out, and almost without thinking, called out, Eric, can you not go? Eric hesitated with his hand on the doorknob. He turned back and chuckled, feeling lonely? Spend more time shopping, buy some clothes, a bit of jewelry. He turned and closed the door but paused before it shut fully. I'll be back soon. I watched the door close slowly, unsure of what I felt. We'd been through college and into work by then, and he still held a place in my heart. I stared at the credit card on the coffee table for a long time before putting it in a drawer, never to touch it, or those feelings, again. A few days later, Eric returned. By then, the Twitter post with my picture was gone. A friend called him up, asking why he deleted a photo of his girlfriend. Unfazed, he replied, just a girl I saw on the street, thought she was pretty. Deleted it before you all misunderstood. I sat quietly in his embrace. He hung up and gave me a soft kiss on the ear, you're so sweet. He thought for a moment, then posted my picture on Twitter, set to private. My wife looks this good, can't let others see, he said, stroking my hair. I looked at him, smiling quietly, feeling nothing. Just like the card locked away in the drawer. Back then, I never voiced my frustrations. It's like drinking water, you know how it is. Now Eric was restless. Laura, say something. Am I just a stand-in? I sighed, realizing it was time to be honest. And what about me, Eric? What were these 6 years? Eric paused. I continued, for 6 years, I never complained to you. Eric, it's been days, and you can't handle it? Eric's breathing was shaky. I sighed once more, hung up, and blocked him completely. Goodbye to those 6 years. I moved on, got a marriage certificate and a wedding with Evan in no time. I meticulously planned everything, picked out a dress, and gave myself a dream wedding. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a home, a family. At the wedding, my friend Nancy said Eric booked a ticket overnight and was rushing back like a madman. I wasn't convinced. Eric had finally gotten together with Lisa, he wouldn't just leave her like that. But I was shocked when he showed up. The Eric I remembered was tall, handsome, exuding confidence. But now he was pale and frail, holding a jewelry box, silently watching Evan and me. More than watching me, he seemed focused on Evan. It startled me. Eric gestured me over with a nod. With Evan busy with colleagues, I approached Eric cautiously, please, don't cause trouble. This wedding means a lot to me. His expression darkened. It seemed my plea provoked him. He glanced at Evan, Laura, who do I resemble? I was confused. He asked again, who's the stand-in, me or him? He called me wife so familiarly, like old times. Though when he did use that word, it was always tied to his mood, and Lisa. Honestly, I preferred him calling me Laura. My expression hardened, Eric, I'm not your wife. I pointed to Evan, I'm his wife, in every official way. Eric was silent, his face stern. I slightly regretted my words. He was used to being a little spoiled, and being countered like this might make him act out. I stood stiff, thinking about how to get this troublesome person away, when I heard Evan calling. Despite my anxiety, his calm presence brought me comfort, don't wander off. Might lose you. He patted my shoulder, reassuringly, don't worry, I'm here. Leaning on Evan's chest, feeling his steady heartbeat, my worries faded. I nodded with a smile, okay. Evan kissed me softly, and I couldn't help but return it. As long as Evan was with me, the wedding seemed perfect. When the kiss ended, Eric was gone. Without causing a scene, he left quietly. Nancy noted how Eric seemed shaken, fleeing like chased by a beast. Then I received a text from an unknown number. You never smiled at me like that. Nancy still observed me. Eric seemed upset. I've never seen him look so defeated. What's up with him? I just shook my head, said nothing, and held Evan's hand tighter. We shared so much growing up and loving each other. Now we were finally together. Nothing else mattered. I was with the one I loved. Eric left, asking Nancy to give me a ring. Nancy scoffed. Now he buys a ring? Where was that effort before? She never liked Eric much. Whenever she saw me with him, she felt helpless, despite her disapproval. Eric was generous with gifts, necklaces, earrings, brooches, anything but a ring. Once, Nancy jokingly asked Eric when he'd give me a ring. A few minutes after a phone call, he had a necklace delivered. Nancy was frustrated. I meant a ring. Laura's been with you for years, doesn't she deserve a ring? Eric sat casually, his arm around my chair as if ensuring I wouldn't leave. He smirked as he made a promise. Within 10 years, you'll have a ring. I smiled weakly, saying nothing. Suddenly, I missed Evan. Evan won't sweet-talk me with promises. Even if someone has a similar face, it's not the same person, and it never really can be. After that meal, I wanted to distance myself from Eric. I ignored his calls, didn't reply to his messages, changed the lock code, and stopped visiting him. But just a few days later, Eric's stomach started acting up. He sent me a video, looking pale and worn out. It suddenly hit me, was Evan this worn out before he went missing in the war zone? I couldn't help myself, and even though Nancy rolled her eyes at me, I went to see Eric. His place was filled with empty bottles. Who knows how much he had drunk while I was avoiding him that week. I sighed, cleaned up his place, made porridge, washed clothes, peeled apples, and took care of him until he got better. Eric held my hand. Don't hide from me. Laura, I didn't lie to you. In 10 years, I really will buy you a ring. He gestured, this big. I laughed, then why not now? Eric went silent. After a while, he spoke softly. I have something I need to sort out first. He pulled me into his arms, lying close to me, letting me hear his quickened heartbeat. Laura, I'm not lying. Wait for me for 10 years. I looked at his face and said nothing. Eric hugged me tighter, afraid I'd run away. So it's a deal, 10 years. I rested my face against his firm chest, listening to his heartbeat. A heartbeat doesn't lie. 10 years later, on our wedding night, Evan and I hardly slept. The next morning, while Evan was still asleep, I slipped downstairs, face flushed, to throw away some used condoms. As soon as I got downstairs, I saw Eric. He was standing next to a Ferrari, his chin covered in stubble, eyes bloodshot, surrounded by cigarette butts. Who knows how many he had smoked. He saw the clear trash bag in my hand and turned away, his voice raspy. Laura, I waited all night, watching your lights go out. All his usual pride vanished. He avoided looking at the trash bag but couldn't ignore the red mark on my neck. Prideful Eric, who had always been confident, now looked like he'd lost his most treasured possession as he stared at my neck, his eyes red. He rasped in despair, Laura, I'm not well. I feel awful. Previously, a word like that would have me dropping everything to take care of him, make food, peel apples, administer medicine, take his temperature. But now, all I could say was, get some medicine. Eric swayed slightly, his eyes reddening further. His family was wealthy, and fearing he'd be kidnapped, they sent him to learn martial arts from a young age. He was toughened by injuries and struggles. His greatest pride was that despite being the only child of a rich family, he was never spoiled. But now, a tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't even bother to wipe it, just kept looking at me. Laura, when I saw you smile at Evan, I thought a lot. I can be like him to you. He closed his eyes tight, biting his lip, as if trying to say something hard, even if I'm just a stand-in. Can't a stand-in become the real deal? Laura, I can't handle seeing you with someone else. I was at a loss for words, waving my right hand, showing a wedding ring. The diamond wasn't big, but it was a design I carefully crafted. Eric's face turned whiter. Laura, take it off. Are you going to do it, or should I? His voice cracked as he begged, I'll buy you a ring, any size you want. Just throw it away, please. I shook my head. I can't do that, Eric. This is my wedding ring. I glanced at the ring. Evan bought it for me, and I love it. Eric choked back a sob. Don't say things like that, Laura. It hurts. It really hurts. I sighed. I didn't hold anything against Eric because, after all, his face helped me through my toughest days. I also hoped he'd move on and look forward. I was about to say more when I saw a surprising sight. Lisa was here. Usually so polished and pretty, she looked awful. She looked at me incredulously, then at Eric. Eric, I didn't believe it when people told me. You broke up with me in the middle of the night, booked a flight back home, really just for her? She glanced at my ring, looking humiliated. She's so plain and already married. Did you break up with me for her? Lisa seemed furious. In the past, one word from Lisa could have Eric crossing half the globe. But now, he didn't even look at her, just kept talking to me. Laura, I really can't do without you. Honestly, I can't sleep. I haven't slept well in days. He looked utterly worn out. Please come back, Laura. I'll change everything. I won't even look at another woman. His voice was painfully raspy. A substitute can become the real deal. Marriages can end. I really will change, please. I opened my mouth, too shocked to speak. I've never seen Eric like this. Never. Even when he and Lisa were quarreling for years, he never begged her like this. Lisa was stunned too. Her face flushed, then paled, and in the end, she flung out, You'll regret this. I won't give you another chance, and ran off crying. Eric didn't even glance her way. I reminded him, Lisa's really gone. Eric just reached for me. I never planned on being with her long term. She was just something I couldn't get over. When it comes to marriage, it's just you in my mind. Eric, I rubbed my temples, interrupting him. Afraid Evan might wake up and not find me, I decided to be direct. I never entirely saw you as a substitute. I've had feelings. How could I not have? 6 years of close days and nights, how could I not have feelings? Eric's eyes brightened a bit. I sighed, but you pushed me away, Eric, don't you remember? Whenever I started to have feelings, you chose Lisa. I grimaced, you pushed me away. You kept reminding me that Evan would never do this to me, that you couldn't replace Evan. The light in Eric's eyes dimmed. Still, he struggled, I can change, Laura. I will. I shook my head, cutting him off. Eric, you don't love me. You just can't accept that someone doesn't love you. It was Lisa before, now it's me. I pointed to my heart, but I can't be tangled up with you anymore. Here, it's filled with my husband now. There's no room left for you. The last glimmer of light in Eric's eyes went out. I didn't say anything more, just walked around him and headed home. I walked to the door and suddenly noticed Evan standing there quietly. No idea how long he'd been awake. I panicked. Did you hear everything? Evan pulled me into a hug. Don't worry. He patted my back. Eric called me, told me about you guys, and asked if I'd give you up to him. What did you say? I asked, surprised, looking up at him. I paid him back double the money he spent bringing me back for treatment. And I sent him a wedding invitation. I was speechless. I wondered how Eric found out which hotel we got married at. Evan knows how to hit where it hurts. Eric left sometime, but I'm not sure when. I didn't have time to think about it. I was busy planning my honeymoon with Evan. On a sunny afternoon, Evan and I arrived at an island for our honeymoon. Blue skies, white clouds, clear seas, golden sands. With a gentle breeze, Evan and I closed our eyes, basking in the sun by the sea. It went on till evening when we returned to the beach hut. I had told Eric years ago I wanted to stay in a place like this, but never had the time. When Evan heard me say this, he booked it right away for our honeymoon. Standing by the window, I tried to look at the sea at night. That's when I noticed a familiar figure in front of the nearby hut, sitting on the beach drinking beer. Alone with empty bottles all around. I pursed my lips, closed the window, but before I could draw the curtains, Evan embraced and kissed me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Eric's lonely figure on the sand, drinking, while Evan carried me to the bedroom. I got up for water in the morning and was shocked to see Eric still there on the beach, motionless. Frightened, I rushed over and checked his breathing. Thankfully, he was alive. Relieved, I was about to leave when Eric suddenly grabbed my hand and opened his eyes. Once confident eyes now looked drunk, sad, and lost, silently watching me in the morning light. He hoarsely pleaded, "Laura, can I hold you one more time? Just once." I shook my head, pulled my hand back, and stood up. "I'm married, Eric." Drunk in a mix of laughs and cries, Eric's voice mingled with the sound of the rising tide. "But, damn it, I can't get over you, Laura. It's not about wanting and not having, it's love not recognized. Laura, my love, give me another chance, will you? I'll cherish it for the rest of my life." I stopped, then walked back to him. This back and forth isn't working. Might as well make him lose hope completely. Walked back, seemingly giving Eric hope. He looked at me, hopeful. I took out my phone, showed him a picture silently. It was a photo of a pregnancy test, with 2 lines. "I'm pregnant, Eric." Eric was speechless. After a few seconds, he pushed the phone away, like it was a snake, refusing to look again. Not a word. I stood up, overlooking him, returned his breakup words, "We're done." I walked back to the hut. Silence followed. Later, I completely forgot about Eric. My days with Evan were lively, all past memories faded. 10 months later, I gave birth to a daughter. At her 100-day banquet, Evan was showing our daughter to everyone, beaming non-stop. I watched, feeling warm inside. A waiter handed me a beautifully wrapped gift box. "A gentleman just asked me to give this to you." Thinking it's probably a gift from a friend of Evan's, I thanked him and opened it. Inside were 2 things. A shiny gold lock. And a huge ring. The ring looked familiar. Nancy peeked over, gasping, "Isn't that the ring Eric gave you at your wedding? The one you didn't want," so I returned it to him. I was stunned, unsure of what to say. After a moment, I picked up the gift box and ran out. But I was a step too late, saw Eric's tall, slender figure getting into a familiar sports car, driving away. Nancy followed me out, sighing, "If he was like this earlier, you too might not have." I shook my head, smiling. "What are you thinking? There are no what-ifs. What's missed is missed. No what-ifs, no do-overs." I returned to the banquet, looking at my husband and daughter, feeling grateful. Evan came over, holding me. "Is there something on my face? Why are you staring at me?" I shook my head, cuddled into him. "I'm just grateful I didn't miss out on you. I didn't miss out on my true happiness."